Hey everybody, it's Rabid. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be giving you my initial thoughts on the Storm Warning update for War Thunder, and spoiler, it was definitely more than a little rushed. And to give you an idea of how rushed this update was, the new vehicle tag on some of the vehicles in my hangar from the last update still hadn't gone away by the time this one hit, which is actually the first time that I've ever seen that happen. With the last update being somewhat late, I think everybody kind of expected this update to be both a little lighter and more rushed than usual, as the developers usually like to get their last update out for the year with about a week or so to spare to quash any unwanted bugs before they head out for the holiday season. While I'm not necessarily going to go into the numerous bugs associated with this update because I assume most of those will get addressed in time, there are some issues that keep me from properly rating some of the vehicles that were added. This also brings up another interesting point. Apparently they added a new map this update. I say apparently because I've seen the preview for it and I've seen the modeling for it, but it didn't show up in any of my matches, so I can't really give you any thoughts on how it plays, at least not right now. Typically, when the devs add a brand new map to the game, they give it a higher weighting in the matchmaker, so you're more likely to see it for at least the first few weeks, and then that weighting goes away. Apparently, they either just didn't do that, or I got very unlucky. They did add a feature with this update where you can go to your profile and change what people see when they look you up, which is kind of interesting. They also added some more options for the custom tank sites, which I always appreciate, and as you can probably tell in a lot of my games, I do use them, so I do think that's a pretty good feature as well. For our first new vehicle that we're looking at, we have the M44, which is an American artillery piece that is not only in the US tech tree, but is also in the British, Japanese, Italian, and French tech trees. So a full half of the tech trees in the game get this vehicle. Of course, it's a good thing so many tech trees get it because it is incredibly good and also incredibly fun. In fact, the vehicle is so powerful, it wouldn't surprise me if it went up in battle rating, and a lot of that really comes down to the mobility. The M44, despite being the size of a house, is way more mobile and agile than you'd think it would be, even in the reverse gear, and it has incredibly good gun handling. On top of that, obviously a 155 howitzer all the way down at 4.0 can basically just click on the middle of enemies and blow them to kingdom come. So on the whole, this is actually a very good, very fun, and very functional vehicle, and I would highly recommend everybody that is viewing this video go in and research one of them for one of their tech trees right away. Honestly, it doesn't take that long to research it, even if you don't have one of the tech trees with it in it. It is an incredibly fun vehicle, and I highly recommend everybody get it. The next vehicle that was added for USA is the RDF-LT premium vehicle, and I say RDF-LT, but it's more RDF-LT in name only. The characteristics of this vehicle, mobility, armor, and firepower, are all somewhat inaccurate, and to top it off, they are all fairly poor for its battle rating all the way up at 11.7. If you were to side by side this with the HSTVL, the only thing this has going for it over the HSTVL is that it has a larger ammo magazine of 60 rounds, but this is not really going to do you much good as this vehicle is too sluggish to reliably get into good positions. It's also a relatively tall and easy target, and the gun is frustratingly inconsistent. Combine all those features with the fact that 11.7 and above USA is one of the worst battle rating brackets for USA that you can play at this point, and this vehicle is really just an invitation to failure. I really would not recommend anybody buy this vehicle until there are some serious changes made either to its characteristics, the matchmaking at this battle rating, or both. It is just basically a pay-to-lose vehicle. It is worse than the tech tree versions, it is frustrating to play, and honestly the matchmaker, even if you're having a good game, because you can see things like the Su-34 and the Su-25 SM3, you're probably just going to get pile drived by a Cage 38 the minute you actually start doing well. Next up for Germany, we have the Panzerhaubitze 2000, and this vehicle is a self-propelled artillery piece and a very modern self-propelled artillery piece. The Germans get a tech tree version and the Italians get a functionally identical Hungarian version as a premium. Now, the Hungarian version, while it is functionally identical outside of a camo net, it's almost too identical. It actually has an MG3, and I'm not aware of the Hungarians actually using the MG3, so it strikes me that this is actually a little too copy pasta. This also combines very poorly with the fact that the current model of the Panzerhaubitze looks like it has multiple problems with it in terms of characteristics not really lining up with real-world stats. So at this point, I can't really rate how good it is. It's kind of just a bad Vidar, and I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a bad Vidar or if some of its stats are going to change at some point, so I'm going to kind of refrain from giving a real opinion on it because I have no idea what its final state is going to be. Another vehicle that Germany got, and also the UK and Italy also got it, was the Strela. This version of the Strela, while it is technically different from the one in the Soviet tech tree, stat-wise looks basically identical, so you can essentially expect a Soviet Strela unless I'm really missing something here, or unless, again, the update is kind of rushed and they just didn't add in the differences. Funnily enough, enough, all three of the nations getting the Strela also got the Gecko with the last update, and if you were to ask me my honest opinion, I think the Strela is noticeably better than the Gecko. Having played it, I'm just not impressed by that vehicle in any way. I don't have any problems playing against it, and the platform is just frustratingly awkward to use, on top of the fact that the Strela is just a very good infrared SAM system. So I would kind of recommend it for basically all of the nations that can take it. Of course, we also have to briefly go into the Two Fronts pack that was released for Germany, which adds 2 different Tigers and also an Ostwind 2 to the game. The vehicles in the Two Fronts pack are technically better than their tech tree counterparts, however the differences on the whole are pretty minor. The extra track armor that you get on some of the Tigers doesn't really stop some of the most common guns you'll fight, and will only really stop them at awkward angles, on top of the fact the bales of wood onto the side of the Tiger Ostfront aren't exactly the most impactful both against kinetic and even against heat rounds. So on the whole, these additions aren't really pay to win like some have advertised. The closest thing to a pay to win feature that I can see in this pack is that both of the Tigers lose the S-mine launchers on the front left and right of the hull. Now if you play the tech tree Tiger H1, the S-mine launchers are really bad at getting the way of your gun depression at basically the optimal point of angling. So if you're angling the Tiger correctly, these can kind of be a bit of annoyance, especially if the target is below you, and these two vehicles not having it does help it out a lot, because that is the thing you should be always seeking to do with the Tiger, and that is move and angle your vehicle. Honestly, if they just deleted the S-mine launchers from the regular Tiger H1 in the tech tree, I would have basically no problem with these vehicles. Most of the differences are either cosmetic or so minor that they're very situational. That being said, I strongly suspect this is essentially a test pack, and the developers are going to try to do more of these in the future, almost certainly a Soviet and an American one, given that those are the other 2 major nations that people usually like to play. And on the whole, I don't hate the idea of giving a player 2 pretty functional and easy to use vehicles and also an anti-air to give you at least a primitive lineup to go with the original 3 slots you get for a given nation, and at least start getting you used to the idea of having a quote-unquote lineup while you're developing a tech tree, and also giving players iconic vehicles they can start working with from the word go. On top of that, the price point of $34.99 US. If you look at the standard costing for premium packs, it's usually 10 times the rank is the amount of dollars you'll pay. So for a rank 7, it will be $70. This is 3 rank 3 vehicles for $34.99, plus of course the premium time and the Golden Eagles. So as far as deals go, it's not bad, especially for somebody who is looking to get into the game and wants to get straight into the iconic World War II vehicles. And moving on to the next vehicle, we have the savior of the German air tree, the Eurofighter Typhoon. This is also appearing in the British and Italian tech trees, functionally identical versions, except for the fact that the German Typhoon can currently go under the ground, which is obviously a bug, or at least I hope so. It would be very funny if the developers came out and said it was a feature. At this point, most players are reasonably expecting the Typhoon to be one of the most powerful aircraft in RRB. The vehicle is very maneuverable, can maintain its speed very well, even while notching enemy radar guided missiles. It has a powerful radar set, it has the AIM-120Bs and the AIM-9Ms, and on the whole should have the tool set to basically take on any fight you could ever throw at it. In ground RB, it's not quite as straightforward as to how good it is, since all it really has outside of standard array of laser and GPS guided bombs is brimstones, and brimstones at this point in the game are somewhat heavily nerfed to the point where they aren't that great. For Germany, its options were so lackluster that the Eurofighter Typhoon is just a straight upgrade over the F4S Ice or even the Tornado, but for Britain and Italy, who both had access to a Gripen C, this might not represent as much of a big upgrade both in air battles and in ground battles, since the Gripen C was already a very competitive aircraft and has a competent air-to-ground loadout as well. Next up for the Soviet tech tree, we have the BMD-4M premium vehicle. This vehicle is rank 6, battle rating 9.3, and can be best described as a BMP-3 that doesn't suck, much like the Chinese ZBD-04A. If you were comparing it to the BMP-3, it has better mobility and it also has a faster reload rate on the gun missile launcher, although the missile launcher aspect only has 4 missiles to the BMP-3's 8, but generally speaking, it should be an upgrade in the vast majority of cases. This does also continue my annoyance that for some reason the developers refused to put any of the BMD family in the mainline tech tree. We had the original BMD-4, which was an event vehicle, and now we have this, which is a premium vehicle. I would love to see the BMD-1 or 2 added into the game at some point, because those seem like they would also be really fun vehicles to use. All that being said, it is really sad and embarrassing to look at the BMD-4M being added into the game in the same patch and by the same development team that added the RDF-LT into the game, because it does look like the developers very clearly have a specific focus. If you were to ask me, is this worth it? I would say say broadly speaking, yes. I don't think this is just better than the BMP-2M in all cases. However, it does have some really nice use cases, and the excellent mobility does help it out a lot. Next up for the Soviets, we have the Su-33 squadron vehicle, and this is actually kind of an interesting vehicle because I was expecting this vehicle to be completely dead on arrival as a 13.0 vehicle that doesn't have fantastic maneuverability and is also stuck with just Fox 1 and Fox 2 missiles. However, they did move the top tier for air all the way up to 14.0, so this vehicle at 13.0 does see a lot more down tiers into the premium bracket, which allows it to at least have a nice niche. On the whole, while it is a very cool looking aircraft, I don't think it's going to be anything really amazing, but it is at least pretty functional for the common matchmaker that it sees because it's not currently getting AMRAAM spammed out of the sky. Of course, the big news for this update is that Japan now has an entire TIE subtech tree that contains a lot of really good ground attack aircraft that really helps Japan out because above a certain battle rating, Japan really doesn't have any good ground attackers, at least in the fixed wing area. So adding a lot of these aircraft, things like Harriers, things like the F-84, and of course the Gripen C all the way up at the top, do give Japan some much better options than they previously had. And of course this also helps to thicken out the Japanese air tech tree in general because the end of it was pretty sparse with only things like the F-16 and F-15s, which weren't really going to get a lot of help anytime soon. So adding the TIE line does give you something else to grind for in the air aspect as well. Next up for China, we have the HQ-17, and the HQ-17 is an expansion on the Tor M1, giving it a slightly better radar and slightly better missiles. That being said, the problem with the Tor M1 was never really that the radar or missiles weren't good enough. While the upgrade is of course appreciated, the issue was always that the vertical launch made the system pretty awkward to use, especially at close to mid ranges, and this doesn't really solve those problems. So while it is an upgrade and it is foldered so that does make it easier to research, it's not exactly the most impactful upgrade in the world. Next up for France, we have the VBCI wheeled light vehicle, and this has a 25mm autocannon that fires relatively quickly. However, the penetration of this gun is capped at only around 82mm, and this does restrict what you can do with it, especially if you bring it all the way up into a top tier environment. At its own battle rating, it performs perfectly fine. The higher fire rate of the 25mm does make it slightly better in some situations than the premium VBCI P2. However, it's not the best possible vehicle as it lacks any auxiliary weapons, and only having 82mm of penetration at most can leave you high and dry against some of the main battle tanks that you'll find if you start taking it too high in tier. All that being said, it definitely has the mobility to take flank routes and get into the sides or rear of enemies to make that 82mm a lot more impactful, but I still think this vehicle is going to struggle a bit if you try to take it all the way up to 12.0. France also gets a premium AH-64D Apache. This is the Dutch version, and this is actually a D model Apache that doesn't have the longbow radar. The problem with this helicopter really comes down to, for some reason they placed it at rank 7, whereas most of the other premium helicopters are at most at rank 6. So this is actually more expensive to buy, and if you compare the D model Apache to the Tiger Hod Block 2, the D model Apache is just kind of worse. The Hod Block 2 has the spiky R's, which make it a lot more meta right now, and it's actually one of the stronger helicopters in the game. I would label it as probably the third best helicopter overall. The AH-64D, the Hellfire and Stinger combination, just in my opinion, isn't good enough. And I really think this probably should have been a rank 6 premium. As a rank 7, it's somehow even more awkward than it would have been previously. The only reason I could really see going for this at this point is if you just have no intention whatsoever of grinding the French helicopter tech tree, but you still want at least a somewhat competent top tier attack helicopter. That being said, because you can grind the helicopter tech tree with ground vehicles and even premium ground vehicles, I do view things like premium attack helicopters as a lot less valuable now than it used to be a long time ago. On top of the fact that this just doesn't really add a lot to the equation of what the French helicopter tech tree can do. The only real big plus that I see is actually the camos. The Dutch demonstration camos for this are actually really nice. You can go check them out in the hangar. But on the whole, I just don't think this is worth it, and I would not recommend getting it. Of course, the big addition for France's update is obviously the Dassault Rafale. This is an aircraft that many people have been waiting on for a long time, and it does not disappoint. The aircraft is powerful, it's agile, it has a great suite of weapons. It also introduces the new Hammer air-to-ground weapons, and on the whole, it's just a fantastic plane. I look forward to getting getting it. The only real downside this has over something like the Mirage 2005F is that it can only carry 6 Mikas. It can't carry 6 Mikas and 2 Magic 2s like the 5F, so if you want to carry Magic 2s, you would have to sacrifice some of your Mika capacity, which is a little annoying, but on the whole, the Rafale is just an incredibly good aircraft in terms of flight performance, and I'm really eager to see how the different types of hammer air-to-ground missiles actually perform in-game, because some of them seem like they could be quite powerful. As a crown jewel for the French air tree, the Rafale definitely fits the bill, and it definitely seems like every French player should be grinding towards it, whether you want a good ground RB support aircraft or whether you just want a good air RB powerhouse. Next up for Sweden, we have the CV90 Mark IV, and this is essentially a CV90 with the 30mm cannon, but upgraded to have Spike ER missiles, so no more of the Bill missiles, and of course having missiles does allow you to engage tanks more effectively at different ranges, as opposed to simply being stuck with an autocannon like some of the 9040s. On the whole, this seems like one of the fairly standard upgrade packages we're getting for a lot of the top tier IFVs, where they add Spike ERs in addition to their normal package of armaments to allow them to be more competitive in a top tier environment. And the last air and ground vehicle for the patch, this time we have the Namur, alright, you know what, I'm just going to call this the Namur Trophy. I don't really know how to pronounce that other word. Now, I already did a full review on the Namur 30, and this version of the Namur has the exact same hull, the exact same engine, and also weighs the exact same amount, which doesn't seem like it's correct. It seems like the turret should probably add at least a good ton or two, but that's another story. Because I already did a full review on a nearly identical vehicle, I'm not going to do a review on this one, so I'll just give you the crash course and exactly what's different. The turret is actually a somewhat armored turret, so the ammo boxes for 30mm housed in the back, so you could in theory get less ammo explosions. On top of that, you obviously have the trophy system. However, there are two minor downsides. The first one is that the depression angles aren't quite as good. On the Namur 30, you had a whopping 20 degrees, so you could use any elevated position really well. However, on this Namur, you only have about 16 degrees, which is still amazing, but not quite as good. On top of that, and the bigger difference is that the spikes are now pointed up instead of pointed parallel with the gun. So shooting targets at close range is going to be virtually impossible with this particular version, whereas the Namur 30 could kind of shotgun its spikes into people's faces and get kills at close range. So on the whole, this version of the Namur will probably be better at long range maps, but worse at close range maps is how I would broadly describe it. In general, I would call this more of a side grade than an upgrade, so I'm not entirely sure why it's a battle rating jump above the normal Namur 30, but at the end of the day it doesn't matter that much because it's not like Israel has a 10.7 or 11.0 lineup anyway. The closest lineup you really have is the Merkava 3s all the way up at 11.3, which was what you're probably going to be using these with, so it doesn't really matter. It's just a little weird. And that wraps up my initial thoughts for the Storm Warning update. As for my thoughts on the update, it is a smaller update and it does definitely feel kind of rushed. There's quite a few copy pasta jobs where the same vehicle is spread to multiple nations, and on the whole, I think the one vehicle that saves this update and makes it really fun to play is actually the M44. I wasn't expecting this when it was initially announced, but that vehicle is just incredibly good, it's incredibly fun, and it does kind of make the update almost worth it on its own, especially given that a lot of nations get it, so most players are going to have access to it as well. But of course, those are just my thoughts on the update. What do you think about the Storm Warning update? Do you like it? Do you hate it? What is your favorite vehicle? Is there anything you're currently grinding towards? I always love to hear that kind of stuff, so let me know down in the comments down below. If you like the video, a like and subscribe always helps out the channel, and as always, danke bitte tschüss.